Marcus Ericsson with the spirit of Ronnie Peterson on board with his helmet. Joins Kenny Brack as the only other Swede.
Did it, buddy. You just won the Indy 500.
Marcus Ericsson wins the Indianapolis 500 in the most dramatic way.
Strategy is defined as a plan of action designed to achieve a particular aim. Finding your winning strategy can happen overnight or can take years to develop. Here on the STRATS podcast, I hang out with athletes, experts, entertainers, and adventurers, some old friends and some new, to hear how they found their edge in a particular field or for a particular event. Expect to hear about motivation, personal struggles and successes, and actual advice for anyone looking to be better today than they were yesterday. My name is Charles Thorp. My work has allowed me to share stories from the best and the brightest, and I'm bringing those conversations here.
This is the biggest race in the world. It's supposed to be hard to win this race. It's not supposed to be easy, and this is just another challenge you need to overcome to become an Indianapolis 500 champion. I start saying that to myself, and then when the engine starts, it all goes into automatic.
That was Indy 500 champion Marcus Ericsson, and it's time for the STRATS podcast. Before we get into the more present day, when did you first find yourself behind the steering wheel of a car, and how'd that feel?
So I started with go-karts as a kid. So I was like, I think 8 years old. I don't come from a family of motorsports or racing at all, so it was not like natural for me to do it. But there was like a go-kart rental go-kart place close to where I was growing up in Sweden. And I bugged my dad one summer. He's like, can I go? And I think eventually he just got tired of me asking him. So he gave me, I got the chance to drive, and I loved it and kept going there. And then eventually the guy who owned the place was a racing driver in Sweden, like a national racing driver. And he was encouraged my dad to say, look, your son is talented. You should get him a go-kart. And then, that's sort of how my career started.
That's crazy that they identified it that early.
Yeah,
what do you think it was? It just that you were aggressive, you weren't afraid, you were kind of really, or was it that you were able to see what you needed to do to win?
I mean, I don't really remember it, but from what I got told from Frederick, the guy who owned the place, he was so impressed with, I had that natural talent, right? Like I was taking the corners and, he's driving the natural racing line, let's say, whereas every other kid that came in would be like all over the place. And he just saw directly when I was driving, like, this guy does it without even knowing it. And I think that for him was the thing that was like, look, he already knows what to do even before I tell him what to do, basically. So I think that's... don't ask me how I had that, but it was there from the start.
Of course, you had a lot of belief in yourself, and you already had some early success. But at what point did you realize, this is happening? I'm going to be a professional race car driver.
So it's quite tough because in racing there's a lot of junior series, and you need to go through all these ladder series before you can be professional, really. So it took me quite a while to get to that point, even though I was sort of, working full time as a driver. It was more like you work to be able to go racing. You didn't really make any money out of it. So it took quite a long time, really, until I was in Formula One, until I was actually like professional in that way. And then I was like 23 years old. So all the way up to then, it was all junior series and trying to prove yourself and, fight with all the other young drivers to be the one that got the chance all the way up in Formula One. So it was definitely a lot of challenging times along the way.
You have a unique perspective in having competed in all these different kinds of professional race car driving, Formula 3, Formula 1, IndyCar. For people who are going to just watch the IndyCar 500, what makes IndyCar different than the others?
So for me, what IndyCar does really well is that it's a lot about the drivers and the teams and gelling with your team and just performing. A lot of motorsports like Formula One is a lot about what car you're in. So for me, coming from 5 years of Formula One, I know that world where it's a lot about the big teams with big resources. They have you can't really compete with them if you're in a smaller team. What I loved about coming to America and racing IndyCar is the fact that you can compete. Everyone on the grid can compete because it's a one spec series, so you get the same car to work with. Yes, there is a million ways to set up that car, so you need to work with your team to find the best setup, but in the end of the day, you as a driver can make a big difference, and that's why I really like IndyCar, and to get that chance to prove yourself and try and beat all these other guys on the grid that's have the same chance, really.
For people who aren't too well versed with the mechanics of it, can you describe the machines that you're driving in IndyCar?
Yeah, it's an open wheel car. It's 700 horsepower. We do 230 miles per hour on some tracks or more. So it's very high speed, high level. We pull up to 5 Gs in the corners, so it's quite extreme on the body. And then for the mind, the races are up to 2 hours, sometimes longer than 2 hours. So the level of concentration you need to drive these cars at the limit, it's extremely high. So it's a lot more than just driving a car. It's like all those things in combination makes it a very challenging way to be a successful racing driver.
What are, I guess, the physical tolls on the body after doing a full race? When you're strapping in, how are you feeling at the end of a race day?
You feel completely like empty in your body and in your mind. It's with all the G-forces, we don't have power steering in the car, so it's really like heavy to steer the car. And then all those G-forces in 2-hour race really takes a big toll on your upper body, your core, but really your whole body, because you need to be strong in your whole body to be able to perform. And what also is important is because you need to be so concentrated and focused for such a long time, the better physical status you have and cardio and strength, it's just going to make you better in the end of the race when everything is deciding. So the fitter you are, the better you're going to make your decisions in the end of a race. So that's why these days all racing drivers are like athletes. So you train every day, you have your personal trainer that you work with, because you need to be a top athlete to perform on a top level in racing.
Let's get into the race. Everybody knows the Indy 500. What did that race mean to you, and when did you first hear or become aware of the Indy 500? So
it's interesting, coming from Sweden, the other side of the world. It's
everybody in the States, of course. When I made that,
but that's the thing. That's the thing. Even from Sweden, growing up there, I got to learn about Indy 500 from a very early age, because in the late 90s, I'm born in 1990, so in the late 90s when I was starting with go-karts, Kenny Brack, a Swedish racing driver, he was over here doing IndyCar and Indy 500 and won the 500 in 99, I think it was. So already then I knew about it, and I was like, I remember watching with my dad, and like that's a strong memory, and already from that point it was sort of in my head. So for me, to come over here to America, to IndyCar, one of the big reasons why I wanted that was to get the chance to compete in the Indy 500, because even being from Europe, the 500 is still the biggest race in the world, and that's a fact.
Every race you're coming in and you want to win, but the Indy 500, I'm sure there's a special amount of preparation, both mental and physical, that you're going through. So this last Indy 500, what was your process?
Yeah, it was interesting because it was my fourth try at the 500, and all previous times I felt like I was pretty fast and like in pretty good position each one of them, but I missed on a good result on small mistakes. And that race is so extreme because it's such high speeds. We're doing 230, 240 miles an hour. It's 33 cars on the grid, and also the fact that it's not as many races or every other race. We go to the race on a Thursday, you have practice on Friday, qualifying on Saturday, the race on Sunday. That's like a normal race weekend. Whereas the 500, you're there for a month, and you have a lot of practice sessions, you have qualifying weekend, and then you have more practice. So it's such a big build-up, and there's so much history around it. So it's such a unique race. And for me, this past 500, I had all those experiences for my first three. I knew what mistakes I'd made, and I tried to learn from them. And I had a very solid plan going into the month to take it step by step and sort of not stress or, just build throughout the month. And then, I had a good qualifying, started from the fifth position in the race, and then had a very strong race plan in my head that I wanted to follow to put myself in a position, because that's the other thing, is 500 miles, right? The race is very long. It goes on for many hours, and a lot of people will fall away by doing mistakes along the way. But really, it's the last 15 laps when you need to be there in position to win the race. And that was basically what I tried to do this past 500, to be there when it mattered.
You know, you described some of those past mistakes you had made. Do you have any of those that you can share, or things that were ringing out in your mind as that you wanted to adapt to and change? Yeah,
so the first year I did the 500, I spun at the pit entry. Doing 230 miles an hour, you get almost blind by the speed, and then you brake to go down to 80 miles an hour for the pit lane, which feels like you're crawling, but you're doing 80 miles an hour. And I just oversped it in the entry, and I spun. And that was, I was on for a really good finish. I think I was running 8th at that time, and I spun out.
For people, that sounds so harrowing to spin out a car at 200 miles an hour. I mean, how many times have you spun out over your racing career, would you say?
I mean, it's part of the job to spin and to crash, to be honest. I've had some big crashes over the years as well, and that's something that sort of you think you never will do it, but you have to do it sometimes as well, because you're always pushing the limits. So it's part of the job. Thankfully, the safety now these days in motorsports and IndyCar is very high, and IndyCar is pushing all the time for being leading the way on the safety side for us, and that's great. We've done a lot of improvements over the last few years even, but definitely you have some big crashes and they hurt. You feel them, no doubt.
What's the worst? Again, like you said, the safety features are incredible, and I, as a spectator, some of these things you watch and you're like, there's no way they survive that, and then they get up and they dust themselves off and they're fine. When was the worst you felt after a crash, and what was the injuries potentially that you had to deal with?
Yeah, I had a couple of big ones in Formula One. I hit the wall. I think it was 75G impact, so that was pretty hard. And I remember they took me to the care center, infield care center at the track, and I felt fine, but I had a lot of adrenaline obviously after a crash like that, and I was actually peeing blood. So then they were very worried, and they rushed me to the hospital because they
I'm hoping you were worried too.
I was worried too. Yeah, I was worried too. For
You're
sure.
fine now, so we can laugh about it.
But it was thankfully it was nothing serious. It was just everything was fine inside of me. But
Human
that was
body's
a big one.
Amazing thing.
Yeah, but that was a big one, and that was probably my biggest impact I've had in my career.
And it's crazy to say this, but do you, after having so many spin outs, is it something that you become, I wouldn't say used to, but familiar with the sensation, and you become more adept at, I guess, correcting or protecting yourself during those situations?
Yeah, I think when you do it for more years, you get better at sort of feeling when you're at the limit and when you go over the limit, and there is places where it's better to spin than other, if you know what I mean. Like if some corners we do is, you do maybe 100 mile an hour or 80 mile an hour in some corners, and there, you have more margin for making an error without it being a big crash. Whereas some tracks where you do 230 mile an hour, if you spin out there, it's going to be a big one. So that's sort of some of the things you learn over the years, but still, there is always that risk, and like I said, it's sort of part of the job. But it's also it's funny but it's interesting when you have a crash. It's sort of everything slows down, and you sort of you brace yourself, and it's interesting how it plays out when it happens.
I can only imagine that the training that you're doing is so that you're at your best physically while you're in the car, but also, if you're taking those impacts, you probably want a body that's resistant and strong. So can you talk a little bit about, and you mentioned how much advancements there have been with the physical training of these drivers, when compared to what's happened in past decades. So what does your program look like going into an Indy 500, or I guess you're in the middle of a season, but Indy 500, what kind of work are you doing to prep your body for that?
Yeah, I find it quite interesting because racing, back in the days in the 70s or 80s, the drivers were smoking cigarettes and drinking and, not training at all. And now, it's a full-time, you're an athlete as any other sport, and it's changed a lot.
I tried to give you some whiskey and you had to put it. I tried to hook you up a little whistle big and you're like, no. Race week.
Yeah, no, but so now it's more about having a really strong training program. I have a trainer I worked with. We're starting our 10th year together now, my personal trainer, and he's coming with me to all the races. He makes a program for me to follow when he's not with me. And so I train, 5 or 6 times per week, usually 3 days of cardio, 2 or 3 days of strength training. On the strength training, mainly focusing on the upper body, but still, full body. But mainly for us, with all the G-forces, you want to have a strong neck, shoulder. That area is very important, but also the core to sort of be able to hold your body in a good position in all these corners and when you get the G-forces. So that's sort of where we focus a lot on. But then I really enjoy cycling, so I do a lot of cycling as well, and that's really good cardio training because the races, like I said, is up to 2 hours, sometimes over 2 hours, and we have a average heart rate on around 70 to 85% on average on those 2 hours, sometimes peaking up over 90% of your max heart rate. And that means that, to simulate that, cycling I find very good, because then you can go out and you have your heart rate monitor and you can be on the same heart rate zone as you are in the car. So something we do a lot as a training as well. So
I love cycling. Where are you doing your cycling, or what's your ride, and what's your, is it road, is it mountain?
Unfortunately, I live in Indianapolis, where it's not many mountains around. It's just flat and fields, but it's actually quite good for that training because you can go out on, I go up north there on the fields, and it's very boring roads, but it's really good because I can just focus on being in the right heart rate zone. Exactly. So I love going on the road bike. I'm not I like mountain biking, but I'm more a road bike kind of guy.
What's the bike? What bikes do you have?
I have a Scott foil. Nice. So I work a bit. I've done for a long time actually with Scott. So I get some stuff from them, and they have good stuff. The Scott foil is beautiful. Stuff. Yeah, it's beautiful. Absolutely.
You mentioned some of the upper body work that you guys are doing going into a race. I'd love to kind of hear from your perspective as someone that's been in so many races that are very challenging. What are the muscle groups, or are there any movements that you guys do in your program that you think directly correlates? Are you training the neck? Are you doing resistance with the neck? Are you doing, things with the arms? Obviously, I imagine you're kind of stagnant in certain positions that need to be strong.
For a driver, you don't want to put too much bulky and big muscles. You want to have endurance muscles almost, So you need to train in a certain way then, more reps and instead of shorter sessions, let's say. But what I do a lot, which is quite unique for me or for racing drivers, is training the neck. We do resistance training with the neck, lifting weights with the neck. I have a special almost like a helmet which I connect to cable what do you call it, cable
resistance cable, cable machine.
Exactly. And you sort of lift weight with your neck, which looks really funny, and always people, when I do that in public gyms or stuff, people look at me like I'm completely crazy, and I even sometimes have to say, hey, I'm a racing driver, that's why I'm doing this, because they look at me and what is this dude doing?
You should just pretend like that's what everybody's doing. Make it the new leg day, exactly. Say, what, you don't train neck, bro? What's up, dude? So you skip neck day? What's going on here? Let's get into day of the Indy 500. What does your day look like? What's your night before look like? Are you able to get a quality sleep before you're in the biggest race of your life, perhaps?
Yeah, it's the 500 is special because it's once every year, and it's it's our Super Bowl, and it's you only get one chance every year to do it, and that makes it special. I think I'm better these days to get sleep than I was maybe earlier in my career, but I still struggle sometimes. You know, it's a lot of thoughts that goes around in your head, and especially for a race like the 500, it's, you know, so many moments in that race that's important: the start, the pit stops, the strategy, the way you drive. You know, it's so many things, and it's easy to get caught up in your thoughts the night before. But you know, I usually get a decent night's sleep. I try to get 8 hours, usually get 6 maybe.
Have you ever had a night before a race where you weren't able to get?
I had one race a couple of years ago when I got like literally like maybe 1 hour sleep because I was a bit sick, and I couldn't. Yeah. I was freaking out because I didn't feel well, and then I couldn't relax, and I couldn't. It was just, I was like kind of sick, slept 1 hour, and then had to go race the next day. But it's funny because the body, in some strange way, can sort of, like, I did that race, and I actually performed well in the race. I did a good race, but after the race, I was completely like the body is shut off, and I had like a week of, you know, completely felt like hell. But it's
lethargic and all of that.
But it's interesting how the body works like that. That it sort of. Can focus and correct even if you're lacking sleep or if you have sickness.
If you're having trouble falling asleep, are there any things that you can do that will help?
I usually try and do breathing techniques. I work over the years with different mental trainers. I'm actually started work with a new one over this winter that's gave me some new techniques as well. I find that part of training in general very interesting. I think the mental side in sports is underrated, so I focus a lot on that. And there it also helps with the sleep, you know, to get yourself or control your body and mind. And I feel like breathing there and different breathing techniques. And I have a Swedish guy I work with now. He's called Stig Wiklund. But he works with some really good athletes in Sweden.
His name sounds familiar, actually.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. He's worked with some good athletes. He's got world champions and Olympic gold medalists he's worked with in Sweden, and he's been really, really good for me. I worked with a guy called Lars-Erik Unestål, who is like a bit of a legend in Sweden and I think in mental trainer in general, because he started, I think, in the 70s or 80s, and he broke out as being like this one of the first in the world to actually focus on it as something that you can actually train to become better. You don't have to train mental training because you have a problem. Mm-hmm. You can train it because you want to be better on the mental side, because before that it was like this, like if you work on your mental side, it means that something is wrong with you. Yeah. And that's not the case, right? Like you do it, you go to the gym not because something is wrong with you. You go there because you want to become stronger. And this is the same with the mental side. You go to a mental trainer or work on the mental side to become better and stronger. So I think it's underrated, and I try and work on that quite a lot.
What does that breathing technique look like when you're trying to get that sleep?
It's breathing with your stomach or with your chest, and then counting, breathing and stuff like that. I find helpful, and I can even use that sometimes during the race day as well. Sometimes you feel stressed and you need to get in your zone or get focused. You have a lot of things on your table, like the 500 is a stressful environment on race day with a lot of pre-race things, with the sponsor commitments to engineering meetings to meet and greets. There is like a ton of things, and then just a simple thing as sit for 1 minute to just do the breathing and focus on your breathing can actually get you back to focus.
So before you strap into that car at the Indy 500, what are you eating?
I usually eat like chicken and rice, vegetables, pretty bland food, but for me it's just fuel basically, and then hydration and make sure I get the salt and minerals that I need. But yeah, usually my food before races is like chicken and rice and some vegetables, no sauce, or usually that's
just keep it simple. Keep it simple. No questions.
It's like I'm not gonna enjoy whatever food I'm gonna eat then before, because I'm usually not very hungry before a race. I kind of eat because I have to.
Right. And when it comes to training, are you doing any training day of? Do you have a stretching routine that you do day of race?
Yeah, I've worked, we've tried, me and my trainer, some different stuff over the years. At some point, I was doing every morning some activation. Sometimes, now the last few years, I haven't done a lot of it. So I don't really have a routine at the moment, what I do in race morning. But I like to get active in the morning and get your body activated. I think that helps, yeah.
So now you're sitting in the car last year. Just take us into that moment, the tactile, like the sounds, like what are you feeling from the machine? What are you hearing? And are you hearing things in the crowd? Can you hear things through the helmet?
Yeah, the 500 is special because, it's 350,000 people at the arena. It's the biggest sporting event in the world, like spectator-wise at one place. So it's pretty spectacular, and you get sort of overwhelmed with everything. And the pre-race show is so cool with flyovers and national anthem, and it's just so many things going on. And it's pretty tough to be like focused on what you're there for, right? It's easy to like start letting your mind get away and all the things that's going on. But yeah, when I strap in, I try and just get in my bubble. I have this thing I do. I press myself 3 times on the wrist, and that's sort of like a sign to my body that it's time to go, and that helps me get in my zone. So always after I get strapped in, I do my 3 presses on my wrist, and that's like, okay, it's go time. And then I always try and visualize the start of the race in my head, so I see what I do the first, when the lights go off, and what to position my car and stuff like that. So I try and run through that in my head, and then when the engine starts, it all sort of goes into automatic. You don't really want to think too much when you're driving. You need to sort of trust yourself in a way. If you start thinking too much, you start making mistakes, in my experience at least.
Yeah, I'm sure that entire last Indy 500 is very memorable, and you could probably account every single turn and every single lap, but maybe not at this point, maybe right after. But take me into a few moments that really happened, maybe just the way that you visualized it and you were able to pull off what you wanted to pull off for that success.
Yeah, I think from the start, starting 5th, I had a plan to go around the guy who was starting next to me in the start, and I did that. And then in the race, my plan was to run in the top 5, around the top 5, all the way until like the last 20 laps, really. So that was my game plan, and I did that until like, I think it was 60 laps ago when we had a pit stop, and I got a bit blocked in the pit lane, had to stop to avoid hitting the other guy, and that put me back to, I think, 8th position. And that was a bit of a critical moment, because that was not good, because sometimes in these races it's quite hard to pass cars, especially when everyone is very similar in speed. So that was a key moment that could have ruined my race, but I stayed calm and sort of stayed to the plan, and picked some guys up off for the next few laps, and then the biggest thing for me was around the last pit stop. I came out 3rd, and I overtook the 2 guys ahead of me for the lead quite quickly, and managed to open a gap and get that lead for the last 15 laps. And then it was all about counting down the laps, and I had the race covered. I had a big enough gap that the guy behind would not be able to catch me until that red flag that came with 5 laps ago. Yeah, when Jimmy crashed, and they stopped the race. And to sit with the race stopped and knowing it's 2 laps to go, I had to sit for 10 minutes with the engine shut off, and you sit there with your thoughts, thinking that, okay, I'm leading the biggest race in the world. It's a race that changes your life if you win, and it's going to be 2 laps to go when we go again. And that was the biggest challenge of my career and life, no doubt, to sort of stay focused and go out and deliver and perform your best performance to win the race.
Was it your team that helped you keep that focus? Was it your own mental work that you had done before that helped you keep that focus? Kind of what, take me into that moment of reasserting, okay, I'm going to get this victory, even though that, again, like you mentioned, it's during those stops that a lot of changes, things become less controllable. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, like yourself.
For me, I knew that this restart that we was going to do with 2 laps to go, normally the guy who's leading on a restart get overtaken because it's also bunched up. So I knew my position was, it's still good to lead, but it was not ideal. And first, I was quite upset about the whole situation because I had the race covered and suddenly it's sort of taken away from me. So I was pretty upset, but my team helped me there on the radio, talking to me and calming me down. And then at some point there, I said to myself, like, stop complaining, and like, this is the biggest race in the world. It's supposed to be hard to win this race. It's not supposed to be easy, and this is just another challenge you need to overcome to become an Indianapolis 500 champion. So I started saying that to myself, and then it sort of got me back into my bubble and my zone, and I wasn't angry or upset anymore. I was just focused on going out and you know, making a plan in my head about how I was going to do this last 2 laps, and I had a very clear in my head how I wanted to do it, and I just went out and did that, and it was tight, but it was enough to win it.
It's funny. I mean, there are a couple of things that you mentioned during this race. First of all, that pit stop where you lost a few positions, and then this situation where I think not a lot of people can relate to driving 200 miles an hour around a course, but they can relate to being tilted or upset about something that somebody else did as a driver. Yeah. And, you know, how emotionally you can react to that. Any of us can react to that. And that becomes a physical reaction as well. Yeah. Like, is that something that I guess you've always been able to sort of deal with? Do you get upset when you're in the car? Are you screaming like most of us would be doing, even if we were, you know, just trying to get around here in New York City, driving around back home? Yeah,
I think one of my strengths as a driver is that I'm pretty calm in the car, and you know, I don't let emotions get to me that easy. Like I said, sometimes it's harder than others, but I think that was one of the reasons how I managed to win that race last year, was that I could keep myself and my emotions in check. I got upset for a bit, but then I was like, okay, stop that. Let's go back and focus. And I think that was what won me the race in the end. So I feel like compared to many other drivers, I'm pretty calm in the car, and I can get upset, but I try and push that away and then sort of deal with that after, and you know, focus on what I can change at the moment, and not dwelling on what's happened or what other people are doing, because you can't control that, right? Yeah. So it's something I feel like is one of my biggest strengths as a driver, is that, and I think it comes a lot from that mental training that I've done over the years. And when you get to the top in whatever you do, you know, it can be sports, it can be business, whatever, it's a lot about mindset, it's a lot about the mental side of things, and I think that's something I've been focusing on. Yeah, and another huge part of sport and of a great competition like this one is that competition element. You know, the people that you're facing off against, the people you're driving against, the people you're trying to overtake. So, you know, for you, I think that's really fascinating as, again, a spectator, is that relationship of the overtaking, the keeping position, you know, that competition level that happens there. And I think I'm just curious, you know, can you take us into maybe a moment during that race where maybe somebody was more difficult to overtake than you thought they would be, but you knew people that maybe make you a better driver by their ability, and then you're able to kind of up your game and take it to that next level and then pass them, you know? You know, that's the cool thing with the IndyCar series, is so many good drivers from all over the world. It's world class, and, you know, even the top 15, top 20 is like so competitive. So it's, you know, everyone out there is hard to beat, and you need perfection to win. And, you know, in the end of that race, me and Pato O'Ward, who is one of the, you know, best drivers in the world, we were battling it out, and we were going side by side into, you know, turn 1 there on the last lap, doing 230 mile an hour, you know, and it's, you know, just inches between our cars, and that's where, you know, you need to step up and then, you know, deliver. And for sure, the competition of the IndyCar series makes that. For, you know, you have to step up and be on your best performance every single weekend and week in and week out, because otherwise people will overtake you and you will not win. Of course, you guys have fear for your life. Nobody wants to lose, or no one wants to get hit a car, but there has to be a element of just indignation, just like bravery within that moment where you're like, I'm not backing down, you know, asserting yourself as that
that dominant force on the track, you know? So yeah, take us into that, like that relationship of I'm not backing down, you know, you're going to have to back down.
Yeah, and that's a fine line, because, you know, you need to be hard like that, and you need to be assertive and show your competitors that I'm not backing down. But also at some situations you have to back down, because you have to play clever as well, you know, because if you never do that, you know, it's all about making the decisions, split-second decisions, but it's definitely a mind game out there on track as well, and you need to show your competitors that you're not the one that's going to back out of situations. So that's one of those things, you know, that last lap, we're going side by side into turn one, someone is going to have to back out of it, and I showed him I'm not going to do it, and then he had to make the decision if he was going to do it or not, and he backed out of it. So it's a lot about those situations, which is, you can't really plan for them. It's like split-second decisions that has to be made.
And you have to trust yourself.
For sure,
in that moment.
For sure. And sometimes you get it wrong. Like, that's part of the game. That's when you crash and you hurt yourself. But hopefully more times than others, you're right.
And then you just learn from it. It just sounds like you've taken those experiences, and that's what led to that great race.
For sure. I mean,
win.
That's the thing, you know, over the years, you know, I've raced all over the world, and it's from, you know, all those experiences that you learn and become better if you take them the right way, and you analyze them and understand what you did wrong and what you can do better next time. And, you know, I'm a big believer in working hard and analyzing what you do and analyzing what others do to learn and become better. And, you know, that definitely helped me that day when I won the 500 last year.
At what point did you internally celebrate that victory? Was it 2 seconds before you crossed the line? Was it right after you crossed the line? Was it not until they put the ring on your finger? You know, when was the moment for you?
I think it was crossing the line. I think that was, you can't ever take anything for granted in racing until you cross the line, because your car can break down when it's like, when you see the finish line, you know, like you never know in racing. So it was when I crossed the line that it sort of, like, I realized I'd won, but I think it sunk in like a couple of months later probably. But like when I crossed the line, I just remember I was screaming out, because I had so many emotions that had to come out. So I was just screaming for like 2 minutes constantly, and the team was like on the radio going crazy and congratulating me, and I couldn't reply because I was just screaming constantly for like 2 minutes.
And then how did it feel to get the ring and to know that you were...
Yeah, it's, you know, the 500 is so special with all the traditions and, you know, all the things you get with being an Indy 500 champion, and just the fact that you will always be an Indy 500 champion. You know, getting the ring, getting your face on the Borg Warner trophy, getting your own like baby Borg trophy that you can keep at home, like all those things. It's just so special, and you know, it's things that you bring with you for the rest of your life. And that's the cool thing with that race as well, is that, you know, you win that race once, you're always in that club of winners, and you know, you will always be in the 500 champion, and that's it's a pretty cool club to be in. It's a pretty cool club to be in. Pretty cool club to be in. Pretty cool club to be in.